Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our weekly session. This week, we're going to talk about efficient routing and scheduling for snow. This also applies very much to landscape maintenance. So if you don't do snow, hopefully you'll stick around and take a few pointers for your summer routing and scheduling as well. So this week, we've got Mike Lysecki, my co-founder, one of my two co-founders, and our CTO. Mike and I have worked together for many, many years. He was the director of operations at my landscape company for a number of years before starting to set out to build software. So he knows the industry very well. He knows the frustration of routing and scheduling snow and all those frustrations that go with it. This week, he's going to do most of the talking. I'm going to do a little bit of Q&A along the way, but Mike, thanks for joining, and I'll let you kind of take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And thanks, Mark, for the intro. Yeah, we'll dive right in as we got a jam-packed agenda for the next 20 minutes or so. We'll take some questions at the end as well. Bottom right-hand corner of your webinar window, you're going to see a chat and you're going to see a questions there. So if something comes up with you on the way, just drop it in there, and then we'll come back to those. We'll take as many as we can at the end of this presentation. All right. So as Mark mentioned, used to run snow for Mark's company, and 200 plus sites some winters, and trying to organize all that was a lot of work. And so a lot of what LMN does around snow is to reduce that work or give you ways to reduce the work, while at the same time maintaining the flexibility that has to happen with snow. Snow is unpredictable. Our staff during snow are less predictable. The execution of snow can be different every event, as what we need to do changes depending on how much snow we're getting, and what we need to do changes depending on the customer. And customers can have different triggers depending on how much it's snowing. All that makes snow hard to manage. And so what we wanted to cover today are best practices that are going to have a significant return on investment for you, and how to set those up in your snow business, while also recognizing there are more or less 3 different types of snow companies and ways to get started. Some of you may be freestyling it, which means every event we sort of react, we plan on the fly. It's really agile. There's lots of phone calls and text messages going around. We'll talk a bit about that. Obviously, we want to get closer to stage 2 and ultimately stage 3. Stage 2 would be, we want to have some planned executions so that when it does snow, we're more or less ready to go. And maybe we don't schedule everybody to every single site in that really deliberate way of telling people what to do, but there is a plan that we're executing. And then there's the companies that exist at stage 3, which is really deliberate scheduling, but it's almost, I don't want to say mindless for the crew, but it's handed to the crew in a way that makes doing their job super easy. This is where I have to go. This is what I need to do when I get there. And this is what you need me to track so that I bill it right. Okay, so let's start with preparing jobs. It starts at the estimate. Obviously, the assumption of an estimate is that, well, this is how we're going to price work, which is important. But in order to price work correctly, we need estimated versus actual hours. So we need to have an estimate on how long this will take. It's useful for pricing for sure, but it's just as useful and just as important to then give that information to the crews. And by that information, I don't necessarily mean price, but do mean the estimated hours, so that they're crystal clear how long this should take us on average. And then that information can get watched in real time by both the crews and the office, so that we know whether that estimated versus actual time is progressing successfully. And then when it's not, being able to deal with that. So being able to spot sites, and that's more than just we missed the estimate. It could be that, but it could also be, I've got somebody out there who just doesn't understand the best way to plow this site. And I know Mark can back me up on this. In our landscape company, we could see a difference of up to 40% on how long it took a certain plow operator to plow a site based on the experience and know-how of that operator. So a good operator who can look at a site, realize, okay, this is the way I should drive to minimize my backups, to pile snow with the least amount of back and forth, etc., can plow a site 40% faster. So not only here are we setting up the estimated hours to give the crews a goal, but we're also embedding in them a question that if it's taking longer, why? Maybe I need to ask for help, but we're certainly raising that discussion out everywhere. So it's super important.
This really creates that opportunity to get out there and coach people up, because I think what happens with a lot of companies as they start to grow and they get more and more operators, more and more trucks out there working, they just kind of accept the fact that things are taking a lot longer. And when you've got the ability to really look at estimated versus actual hours, look at similar sites, look at similar outputs, understand what your key metrics are, it becomes easy to see where the need for upskilling and training is. And so you can go out and work with those operators, make sure that you've really passed on the best practices of how to plow or how to de-ice more efficiently, and really unlock the potential for the whole company. Because otherwise, I think what happens as you scale, you just slowly get more and more inefficient and you start to accept it. And I think that's where a lot of companies really hurt themselves as they scale and they see profits just steadily dropping and customer service expectations not being met. So I think having that estimated versus actual hours gives you that pulse from the dispatch side, but also right in the moment for the operator to know when things are going well and when they're not, and where to focus your efforts on creating improvements.
Yeah, spot on. I'd say this is one of the biggest reasons companies find themselves maybe doubling in size, but doing the same profit they did when they were half as big. And who wants to do that? And we'll talk in a second about how to embed that into your processes so that that knowledge and know-how by your best operators can get disseminated throughout the rest of the company so that everybody knows how to operate at or almost at that same level. The next thing the estimate does, though, is also going to, for the customer, especially as we're presenting the estimate, dictate, okay, this is what's included in the seasonal. These are the extras. And then perhaps even these are the extras that are charged, by material. So by bag or by ton, for example, of salt. But all that estimated will also come over to the jobs, or should also come over to the jobs, will in LMN, so that tracking this job becomes automatic for both the crews and for billing. So what I mean by that is when we leave the job, the estimate tells us what services we're creating so that we can prompt the crews, okay, what did you do here? And it lines up exactly with how we estimate the job. We also need to probably bill those services unless it's all contract, but even then we need to bill it. But so we want to track what services did we do, how often and when did we do them? And we make that automatic because as you set up the services on the estimate, that flows through to the crew app so that they're just ticking off what they did. They're only getting asked the questions or the services that we estimated. So it makes their job really clear. These are the 6 things that we need to track on this job. If I have a different job where perhaps we're billing by the inch or whatever, again, they're only seeing those questions in that. So I don't have to guess what I need to track for what job. And as an operations or billing person, I don't have to guess what this written down piece of paper means and what they were supposed to track versus actual. It's super clear. It just all flows through from estimate to crews, to probably billing, and then also to job costing so that we can look back at the end of the year and, okay, how many times did we do this service? How long did it take? How many bags or tons of salt did we use? And really get better and better at estimating each year. But obviously one of the major outcomes of this is to make snow billing automatic. What we want to be able to do is improve our cash flow and not miss any billing. And snow billing can get complicated if you've got different contract scenarios and get complicated really quickly. The crew can miss tracking, the office can miss tracking, the office can miss entering something or mispricing something unless they know every customer's contract. Doing that takes a long time to get right. So automating it just has such an incredible positive impact on the business. It makes snow events less stressful, but certainly makes them more profitable.
Such a game changer for the crews doing the work when they really can get out there and just record what they're doing, and they're being prompted on the app to update the appropriate information. And when with paperwork systems, I know in the past for us, it was really difficult to get people to record the right information because every contract might be a bit different and they don't know what the contract scope includes or doesn't include. So they may forget or not know to record something really explicitly. And then we end up missing billing. This way, the billing will never be missed because it's prompting that operator to update the correct information for that contract, which really just takes all the guesswork out of the day-to-day operations for the field and automates that billing for the office. So they're not stressed about whether or not they've got all the right information. And so billing can truly be automated and put out in the moment. You can bill as often as you like, and it's going to be super accurate right up until the shift ends. So definitely a game changer.
Yeah, that's a big one too. Just the ability to like have an event on the weekend and bill it on Monday, right? And lots of companies don't do that today because it's onerous. And if you were doing billing correctly, it takes longer than that to comb through all the paperwork. So the ability to make that time 10% of what it is manually, maybe less, allows you to do that, to bill more consistently, to get cash flow going. And certainly your mistakes are, the less time between execution and billing, the less likely you are to make an error. All right. Then in addition, notes that we put in the estimates or instructions that we put in the estimates that we've got from the customer during the sales process, during our site walkthroughs, our initial inspections, that gets loaded into the job so that when I'm a crew and I clock in, I'm going to see a couple of things. Number one, maybe the easiest way to get to this site, right? My map. Number two, when I get to the site, which I may never have been to before. So it's all well and good if I've been to this site 10 times. I probably know what I'm doing. But imagine my truck breaks and now somebody at Mark's got to go plow my site. Well, Mark needs the instructions that I usually get or that I know instinctively.
And I definitely need the instructions because when I showed up without maps, I always caused the most amount of damage.
I wasn't going to say it.
I was pretty famous for that.
So how do we eliminate that? Well, we could have clear instructions and that show up every time the crews clock in. So there's just no way to clock into the job unless you've indicated that you've read this instructions. It doesn't mean that they read them, but it certainly means that they acknowledge that they read them. And we want to do as much as we can to inform the crew what's important. The next thing you can do is upload files for the job as sitemaps. And those sitemaps are one of the best tools you can give them. It's a visual instruction on what needs to be done, where it needs to be done, and even to take it a step further. So one thing we used to do on sitemaps is on some of the trickier sites, this goes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, not just indicating what needs to be plowed and where it needs to be piled and the sidewalks and everything, but also how to plow it. So directional arrows with 1, 2, 3, and 4 that show the crews start here, push this way, then go here, push this way, go here, push this way. For those complicated sites that needed that level, or for us stood out as like, why are we missing the hours on this? It's because it's complicated. We'd sit with some of our best operators. We'd understand how they attack the site and build that right into the site map so that everybody who goes to site gets clear instructions, gets to see visually what to do, also can see visually how to do it. So it's an easy way of communicating that. What that gives us is make sure that we can hold any operator, crew lead, whoever, accountable because we've done everything we can to give you good instructions. There's no reason that we shouldn't have things done the way we think. And that ultimately means the customer is getting the service that they asked for exactly the way they asked for. And if we do that, we're going to be able to maintain more customers at higher profit margins at scale. And then part two of that,
Mike, was the priorities. By putting the site maps in with the priority areas, that made it a lot easier to dispatch. And I know a lot of LMN companies have really started to do this over the last few years with the app, is when you put your site maps in, show the priority areas. And that way, when dispatching, you can just send one dispatch out and say, hit priority 1 only. And that might be 11 p.m. when the storm's coming in. And they're just going to clear out loading docks and key parking areas, for example, rather than plowing an entire property only to find out, it's going to snow hard for the next 4 hours and you're going to have to do it again. And this really makes a difference on all-in salt contracts or de-icing contracts. You don't want people putting salt down and doing a full service early in the storm. You might want them to just do priority 1 area, salt that area down, let the snowfall finish, and then go ahead and plow everything and salt at once to reduce the salt used during a storm. And so when you've got really good site maps, you can really get more efficient at the way that you manage materials, manage your crews, and ultimately keep the customers happy, as Mike just said.
Yeah, dispatching becomes simple with that. You can just color code different areas on your maps for, red might be priority and yellow is everything else when we get to it. putting that information in their hands certainly makes dispatching so much easier. And not just dispatching, but dispatching and then keeping up with the changes, right? I need to send somebody else here because the other person's running behind, and I don't have to explain exactly what needs to get done. I don't have to worry that person's going to understand instinctively what needs. It's going to be crystal clear when they get there, or even before they get there. All right. So once we have an estimate, we've got good instructions, we've got crystal clear specs so that anybody can execute. Now we're going to look at, again, before an event, but we're going to look at now, how do I plan these things? So once we have these at a job level, we want to group them together into routes. And there's a couple of ways to do that. There's ways for really organized companies. There's also ways for companies that maybe aren't so organized, maybe don't have somebody who's working at 11 o'clock at night that can schedule everything. That company still needs to execute effectively. So we'll take a look at ways to do that. I'm going to start looking at unscheduled routes, which if you're using LMN and you've not used unscheduled routes for snow, they're a key to efficient snow execution. What they'll allow you to do is build routes, groups of sites that allow you to dispatch that in seconds, but also will make them as efficient as possible so that you can maximize the amount of time that you're generating revenue. And what we mean by that is when I'm working through an efficient route that's set up in a way that has the most amount of plowing and the least amount of driving, it means crews can spend more time plowing. You know, at each route level, as the routes get, you know, if you have 10 sites in a route and you can reorganize that route to be really efficient, you might find yourself next year being able to do 11 sites with that same operator in that same amount of time because you've saved yourself 10% of time with a more efficient route. And we were living proof of this. I certainly saw that happen at least twice over that I can imagine, where our routes got a little bit bigger. And honestly, our end times didn't get a lot longer at the end of the route. So
yeah, it has a big impact too on de-icing, and particularly as you start to scale the company, often you start to have dedicated salter trucks. And I think it makes a huge impact there because, you know, oftentimes one salt truck might be, you know, hitting 30, 40 sites in one night, where that might cross over 3 or 4 plow routes. And so I think really getting the optimization for salter trucks has a massive impact. You know, really good quality salt truck setups, you know, as everybody here knows, you know, $150,000 to $200,000 per truck. We want to get the most out of them. And I think really getting that optimization dialed in those circumstances has a huge impact on the revenue that you're generating per unit, which is what matters. It's easy to be lazy with routing and have double the equipment you need, but there's not a whole lot of money left over if you're buying, you know, expensive vehicles and then paying people to be in them when you just don't need to. There's just so much more profit in this game when you've got all of the efficiency dialed, and this is where it's at.
100%. And it sort of looks like this. So once you take your route, if you will, your group of sites in a common geographical area, then you can optimize that route. What that'll do is call Google Maps, which will look at the most efficient way to execute those sites. And it's also important to realize that it doesn't have to be starting from the shop and ending at the shop. In fact, I see 4 different ways of optimizing routes in snow and ice, and they have different use cases depending on your client sensitivity and how important they are, like how important prioritization is, but also things like how events usually go and the reliability of your equipment. I'll talk to some of those. So there is the shop to shop, right? We might have a route that's most efficient starting from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then ending up back at A. That's one option. Another option that's really commonly used is snow is actually finding the most efficient way to get from A, B, C, D, and E. So the furthest point away from the shop. What's the most efficient way there? So that when the crew's done, on their way back, they can hit anything that got missed. So we actually optimize to get away from the shop as fast as possible, as optimally as possible, so that once we're as far away, we can then on the fly sort of redispatch the crew to keep up with any things that are slipping through the cracks. There's also first priority shop to site. So we may have like a site that has to be done by 7 a.m. And so that site gets top priority, or it's a really sensitive site. It's an Air Force base, it's a hospital, it's a nuclear plant, something. And so we can start the route from there and then figure out the most optimized route, or the first priority site to the furthest job. So just like we talked about. So we go first priority back to shop or first priority out. All four are really common ways. All are available. Simply plugging in a whole bunch of sites here and saying optimize is good. Just note here, you've also got a start address and an end address so that you've got the flexibility to start it somewhere, which even could be the crew lead's house. Maybe they take the truck home in the winter. You want to start it from their house. You want to start it from the salt depot. Whatever the scenario is, you can make sure you have the most optimal route. And then for those companies that aren't as deliberate, because once you've got a route optimized, I'm going to show it in a second, or an unscheduled route optimized, it's really easy to deploy to crews during schedules. For those companies that do that, so just before an event, we're going to go click, 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 and deploy those routes out to crews. Some companies don't do that. I don't have somebody who works at 10:30 at night. We just know this is my route, and then I go. And for those companies, for sure, save those optimized routes as job groups. Job groups are something that is like a route that I can clock into at any time. It doesn't need to be scheduled for me. So if you have both, you've got the best of both worlds. An unscheduled route allows me to take that route and dispatch it to a crew in seconds. But if I've also saved it as a job group, then even if I haven't dispatched it, I can still have somebody go to that route and see what I'm supposed to do in the order I'm doing it and get all the same benefits of site maps and instructions, etc. This is going to save us a lot of calls, emails, texts, conversations during an event. And people aren't, it's not easy to get a hold of everybody all the time. And when I don't, they're probably off working on something they shouldn't be. And B, if I'm not answering my calls or watching my texts, or I'm plowing safer, I'm driving safer, and I'm also spending more time plowing. Once it's time to deploy those routes, then as I mentioned before, you've got two options. So the two options I'm going to describe right now is using the job groups, which are routes, which are not scheduled. So that's your first option. This is, let's say you don't have somebody at 11 o'clock at night who's ready to tell each crew where to go that particular event. Great. You have your routes set up. There's no action required before the event other than making sure that each operator knows what route they're working on, which they're going to have to know somehow anyway. So that's pretty obvious. So they'll just clock into that route. That route will show them, these are all the jobs we get to in the order that we get to them. They simply punch into those jobs in the usual order. And then if we have to make changes to that or need them to go somewhere, we can communicate that, including, hey, Jim's fallen behind tonight. Go on Jim's route and work your way from the bottom up till you guys meet. So it's still organized and effective, and it doesn't require anything up front. Now, the more organized snow companies, and what I'll call sort of the best-in-class snow companies, they'll use the whiteboard. So they'll use unscheduled routes. And what they'll do before the event is deliberately schedule each operator with the sites that are going. And again, that's done fastest by using unscheduled routes. They're there, they're sitting there. You just simply say this route to this crew. 2 seconds later, they're scheduled. Then they go on, everything's clear with them. But then as the snow event is happening, we can also drag and drop jobs from crew to crew so that once I'm done, I can see new stuff in my thing. I don't need to communicate anything to them. And as well, I can look at the whiteboard and see that crew progress visible. So it looks something like this.
This is also really valuable if you've got some rovers, which is, typically if you've got really high concentration, you've got a lot of sites in a fairly small geographical area. Often there will be some rovers. It could be a supervisor that's got a truck and plow with a small salter that kind of fills in and helps wherever there's some problems. But it's so much easier to have rovers and have them actually contributing in a meaningful way when you can just sort of reallocate the work in real time like this.
Absolutely. And you can monitor progress, right? I'm going to see everything live. I can see what's been completed, and it's like linear, top to bottom. So it's really easy to see where they're going to next, where they're going to get to in a couple of minutes. The other view of that is equally important, and it's not from the whiteboard view. It's from the live maps view. So there's a live tracking component. We can do this by crew, so we can see live tracking by crew. I'm currently showing the one that's live by job. This one was so valuable in snow because what you're able to do is set up time intervals with different colors. Then look at a map for a particular route or group of jobs. Doesn't even have to be a route. It could be all your snow jobs, for instance. And then each job gets a push pin on the map, and that push pin is color-coded by the last time we serviced that job. I can tap any push pin and see what's happened there, including photos and notes and more stuff. So if I'm working with a customer on the phone, for example, I can just go here. I can just tap their pin on the map and I can see exactly what's been done. I can communicate that information. But just as importantly, it shows me the sites that we may have missed. And that in snow and ice is absolutely critical. So if I've got everything color coded and I see, for example, this job down here is gray, that means I haven't got there yet. That's absolutely something that needs to catch my attention, and I need to be able to get hold of some crew to remediate that issue while it's just a risk before it becomes a slip and fall claim that we end up having to fight at the end of the year.
And it's so important to manage that way, because what tends to happen during a storm is typically we put our really high priority locations at early in the night or early in the storm. And, many times, obviously, we are servicing properties overnight. But as it's getting closer to 7 a.m., maybe we have, a good portion of the properties that have to be finished by that time. And when you can just take a quick look here and see how everything's going, you might be able to redeploy either adjacent crews or even the actual crew responsible onto sites based on timelines. And so that really, having that view in the moment changes everything. I think you can really elevate that level of service across the board and really put all of your resources where they're needed without any guesswork. And I think when you don't have that live view, you just kind of set a plan, set it and forget it, and what happens, happens. But here you can truly be proactive and really service the customers the way they expect to be serviced, and really eliminate all of the risk of losing contracts or, finding yourself liable in the case of an accident.
Yeah, nothing's worse in the let everything happen the way it's going to happen. And then you get that phone ringing and you're just cringing on what's this about and what am I going to have to deal with? And why didn't I know about it earlier?
That used to kill me when I'd be back at the shop on calls. I'd be sitting in my truck trying to organize everything, and I'd see 5 trucks come rolling in, and I've got 5 or 6 other people screaming that they can't get through their route. I've got customers calling. All you needed was those 5 trucks that are done to be out there helping. And it's so hard to communicate using phone calls and text in the moment and really understand where you've got extra capacity and where you're falling behind. And this just puts all of that in one place. So you can be sitting in your truck out in the field. You could be sitting at your office running dispatch there, or maybe you're on vacation down in Florida. But in any case, you know exactly how to reallocate resources and really make sure that you get the job done that you promised to your customers.
Absolutely. Return on some of these best practices is incredible, right? Your route optimization, easily an extra 20,000 per 100K of revenue, just by, again, reducing the amount of time driving or getting to driving or driving inefficiently or redeploying crews efficiently, and doing it in a way that allows us to get as much done in as little time as possible. So, every route will be able to see a 10% increase efficiency, but also as we start managing and deploying changes to those routes, we get even more efficiency as it continues to build on itself. Or we send people to routes they're not used to, and they maintain that efficiency. Reducing mistakes, and mistakes could be rework out in the field. So I've plowed the wrong thing. I've done the wrong thing at the wrong time. I've done the wrong thing at the wrong site. Reducing that easily adds revenue, because those mistakes are costly to fix. If you pile snow in the wrong place, especially once it hits a certain size, that's an expensive problem to fix. The idea, and just even sending somebody out to redo a site a couple times, a month, because first it's this site, then it's this site, then it's this site. It adds up, and it's all, again, could be, if we weren't managing mistakes continuously, we could do the same snow with less people, or we could do more snow with the same people that we have today, which is ultimately where we want to get to. Reducing missed billing is a huge one. It's just so easy to miss billing.
I think 5K is way too low, Mike. I got to tell you, I think missed billing on snow, I think, is roughly 20% of revenue. I see that all the time. I was looking at that just before we came on, and I meant to say that, actually. I think most companies really kill themselves on missed revenue. So I think we're being conservative on this one.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It certainly depends on how. I mean, if you're all contract, you've got less risk. If you're all per, you've got a ton of that risk. And I wouldn't argue with that at all. Reduce slip and fall risk, right? By executing properly, just the cost of insurance now, trying to get reinsured, the cost of the claim, the cost of fighting the claim. $30K again, probably way undershot the actual financial impact of this. But even to be conservative, we're looking at $30K per claim. And if I can save one of those a year or one of those every couple of years, the return on investment is incredible. And then, of course, having happier, safer customers with reduced turnover. And by turnover, we mean when customers aren't happy, they look to other contractors to renew their tender. When that happens, we all have to fight at lower profit margins to keep or to get that customer. If I can avoid my customers every year going out and reseeking other contractors to price their work, I'm going to be able to maintain higher profit margins. I'm also going to start to be able to pick and choose the customers I want to keep based on the ones for whom I have the highest profit margins. Makes a massive difference at the end of the year. And then other reasons, right? Culture. We're efficient. We're performance driven. We're organized. We're clear. People are going to want to come work for us. It sort of starts to bleed into recruiting. We used to show our app during job interviews. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to get. This is what you can expect for us. And 9 times out of 10, the answer would be, I've never worked for a landscape company this organized before.
It almost gamifies the form a bit too, right? It kind of gamifies a little bit in the sense that when you've got an app that's, ideally on a mount on the dash and it's taking you from site to site and you're updating it, there's a feeling of progress. And I think people really start to feel a lot more organized. They feel like they're sort of playing a game as opposed to, getting all confused and stressed out, flipping through paperwork and binders in a dark truck in a snowstorm. It's just so much easier to see the screen, know what's happening, know how progress is, know how long you're supposed to be there, access the information. It really just, I think, changes the feeling of being out there doing the work. And, when you're sitting in a nice warm truck and you can have the radio on, listening to the right music or listening to a game, and you've got a nice app to follow along, snowplowing becomes a lot less stressful. And I think that's ultimately what you want if you want to really scale your snow business. You want to make it an enjoyable experience. A lot of my employees looked forward to the snow season. They loved the snow season because they really were independent workers. They could get out there, work at their own pace. They knew how they were doing. And I feel like the app really, really drove a lot of that culture.
100%. Just that clarity of like, what am I here to do? How do I do it? Nothing's more frustrating than, starting at 9 at night and then having it be 7 in the morning and you're out fixing other people's work that didn't get done properly, or even your own, because none of it's organized. That's so frustrating. It just made everything so much easier. And then for sure on the sales side, so Mark can talk to this for sure, but we used to show people, this is our process. This is how we route. We used to show the app. This is how we run through your job. This is how we know we're going to do what we're telling you right now we're going to do, because it's organized. It's a process. I'm not just promising something. I actually have the tools and the processes behind the scenes to do it. And this is what they look like. And so we would differentiate our company on process, on technology. We differentiate ourselves on the portal. So for almost all our customers, I recognize not everybody wants to give it to all their customers. But for almost all our customers, they were able to log in and see a history of what we'd been doing at their site without having to call us. Made my life more efficient, certainly improved their trust. We weren't perfect, but we were close to perfect because we had all the other things going, and we were transparent, and companies really appreciated working with us for that. In fact, they would change their tenders to insist on that, which helped us win it year after year after year. So that increased efficiency will lead to higher retention, not just for our own profitability, but also when we're doing things right the first time, that means we're doing things on time and as expected, which is going to lead to higher retention. Companies have enough risk dealing with contractors. Price is obviously a factor, but so too is convenience and lack of management. And if they've got a contractor who they don't have to manage and get stuff done, they're unlikely to want to change. It's got to be a really compelling reason. And then, of course, when they're in that frame of mind, that gives us the ability to ask for and get higher profit margins, both for existing renewals and also for new sales, because again, we've differentiated ourselves. All right, I'll talk to this one for a sec. Mark can maybe color it in more, but like this kind of content, And then looking to maybe make it more macro or big picture focused. How about on the whole company? Mark's on a 2-day mastermind tour of North America right now, and will help businesses build their growth plan, develop a strategy for both growing revenue, growing profit, but also about changing the way that we hire, changing how people are motivated, changing how we're dealing with employees, so that what we're doing is really changing the culture of the company. And then, of course, systemizing all that, and then creating that kind of accountability with metrics and KPIs that are going to lead to the results that we're all looking for, which is more profitable. I can let you chime in there, Mark, but just before I do, on the right-hand side, you want to sit with Mark for 2 days and go through this. You can go to our website, golmn.com/workshops, or while I hold it here for a second, just take a picture of that QR code. It'll take you right there. And if you put in Web 10, you can get 10% off that thing right now.
Yeah, no, that was a great description, Mike. Between now and March 1st, I'll be in 2 cities a week, most weeks doing 2 days in each city. So plenty of travel ahead for me during the cold months. Looking forward, though, to meeting with as many customers and prospects as possible. I love doing these events. We're really just building that blueprint for success for your business. We're trying to create a checklist of things to do over the course of the year that will really change the outcomes. We're kind of focused on building an organization that really is highly focused on continuous improvement. And really kind of creating a transparent organization for you and your business. So hopefully you'll join me. I think we've got quite a few left between now and the end of this year, and we're just about to announce all of the dates for January, February, and March. So hopefully you can make it to one of these.
Awesome. And then next week, this same time, same bad channel. I'll be back, actually. We're going to do budgeting mastery next week. So next week, we're going to take a look ahead, probably, at building your 2024 budget and just covering some of the best practices, maybe the hidden gems of building a budget. I'm going to stay away from like the really basic explanation of how to do it and more try to focus on some of the things. We'll certainly open that up more for questions and answers so that we can deal with your thoughts, your ideas, your stumbling blocks in the past over budgeting, and how to get the best, most profitable, most realistic 2024 budget that we can. Again, link on the left-hand side, golmn.com/mastermind-weekly. Same one you would have used to register for this, or you can scan that QR code with your phone.
Great. I think we're going to take some questions now. So just from the chat, I think Brittany's going to moderate the questions. I'm going to jump out. I've got to jump into another meeting, and Mike's going to handle all of these questions for you. And hopefully you've gotten some value, and you see the outcome of really focusing on efficient routing and scheduling in your business. I think it is the key to growth. It's impossible to grow. It's impossible to really unlock the true potential on the profit side without being extremely good at efficient routing. That really is the key to success. Knowing how to sell snow is one thing, but really knowing how to execute is another. And I think the route really is the foundational item for success when it comes to field operations. Training and everything aside, it's all going to contribute to a really efficient company. But if the routes aren't set right, doesn't matter how good the equipment is, how good the operators are, you're just not going to be able to unlock the true potential. So thanks for sharing this week, Mike. And I'm going to sign off and leave the Q&A to you and Brittany. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, so just because we're running a little bit behind, I'm just going to pose 1 or 2 questions for you, Mike, just so we can get through this. But the first question I have is, how do I set up an LMN time job to have hourly rates that also automatically tracks quantity of material used, as well as on the same punch-in task?
Yeah, for sure. So 2 things. On the task level, each task has a checkbox, and the checkbox, I might get the wording exactly wrong, but it says something to the effect of this task is billable by the hour. So that checkbox needs to be on. If that is on, then there's another section of your job, which is called rates, and it's on the left-hand side of your job menu. So open any job and down the left-hand side. So they're called hourly rates. That's where you'd set up hourly rates. And you can set up as many rates as qualify. So you might have, as an example, I don't know your specific, but I've got a pickup truck and a plow, $95 an hour. I've got a skid steer and a pusher. It's $125 an hour. I've got a tractor and a loader. It's $175 an hour, just as examples. So that's how we'd set up that. Now, and when a crew clocks into that task where that checkbox is on, it's then going to prompt them, what rate are they working at? Now, you don't have to show them the prices. You just show them the names of the rates, right? So plow truck, skid steer, tractor, whatever. They can pick the rate that they're working on, pick different rates for different people. And then those hours will be billed hourly. Tracking materials is exactly the same as what you might do today, which is you can set up services with linked materials, meaning if I clock into something or I mark off something complete like salting, it'll then ask me how many tons or how many bags of salt did I use. Or you don't have to link them to the services. You can just have them there so that they're always asked whether or not they did that service or not. And so in doing that, we just go to the services list, or in this case, the materials list, and you're going to add those to the job. So bag of salt and then the price and then how it's billed. By the sounds of it, you're asking me how to bill it by the bag. So it would be billed by unit, or it could be billed by app. So for example, if you don't measure your tons and salt, your salt in tons, you could say salt application and then say per app, and you could do that. Or you could track it and do it by ton. It's your call. Depends on how you build the contract. But that's how to do both.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much, Mike. I think we're going to cut it here. Apologies that we couldn't get through all the questions. We're already over time, everyone, but stay tuned for next week, and we'll be talking about budgeting mastery. So you'll also get a recording of this afterwards in an email. So thank you so much for your time, and see you next week. Thanks, Mike.
Sounds good. Thanks, Freddie. All right, see you.